Gone with the Wind might be remembered for corsets, charm, and scandal, but underneath all that velvet, it's selling us a glossy version of history where slavery fades into the background and the Confederacy gets a makeover. But is Miss Scarlet stuck in the past, or quietly shifting into something new? Let's talk about the lost cause myth, the truth it covers up, and whether Scarlett O'Hara is actually the blueprint for surviving the death of the Old South. Welcome to Real Talk, where we spill the tea on movies, media, and all the madness in between, with wit, sass, and zero sugarcoating. The movie is based on the novel by Margaret Mitchell, a beautifully written story about complex characters clinging to a world that's dying. Mitchell herself was born and raised in the post-war South, steeped in Confederate nostalgia, and it shows. The Lost Cause is a post-Civil War narrative created by white Southerners to romanticize the Confederacy, downplay slavery, and reframe the South as noble victims instead of the defenders of an enslaving system. When they talk about the cause, they don't mean justice or liberty. They mean the lost cause, a romantic lie that turned the Confederacy into underdog heroes and turned slavery into a polite backdrop. Spoiler, it wasn't about states' rights. It was about human rights and the denial of them. And that's the lie the Lost Cause keeps whispering. We weren't evil, we were just tragically misunderstood. Southern defeat? Instead of marking the triumph of freedom and the end of slavery, it becomes some kind of noble suffering, a mythic downfall of a genteel, honorable world that never really existed. Ashley Wilkes, the Old South. Romantic, idealistic, and painfully weak. He's a gentleman clinging to a code of honor that no longer feeds anyone, not even his own family. He criticizes Scarlett for running a mill because it's not proper, but enslaving black people was. And yet, he has no problem accepting the money it brings in. He represents nostalgia without function, a dreamer in a world that's moved on. And let's be honest, he rejects Scarlett's love, but his behavior is messy. He keeps her emotionally hanging until the very end. Rhett Butler, the New South. Savvy, cynical, and completely over Southern delusions. He's called dishonorable because he married a woman after being stuck with her overnight, then dumped her because he didn't love her. Why? Because he refuses to live by hollow traditions. He sees the war as foolish, the cause as fantasy, and honor as a luxury no one can afford. He marries Scarlett because he sees himself in her. Bold, shameless, hungry to survive. Yes, the age gap is... yikes. She's a teen, he's in his 30s. But this was 1860s Georgia and 1930s Hollywood, so it sadly wasn't considered eyebrow-raising then. Scarlett O'Hara, the Bridge. Young, spoiled, irresistible, and obsessed with the one man she can't have, Ashley. But while she chases the Old South fantasy, she acts like Rhett. She manipulates, adapts, and fights like hell. Her survival arc? Bold and beautiful. She hustles, cheats, claws her way out of ruin. She goes from clueless rich girl to ruthless boss. She feeds her family, saves Tara, runs a mill, and makes money, while Ashley just pouts about honor. When she tricks her sister's fiancé Frank into marrying her for financial survival, cold move, but low-key heroic. She knew her sister wouldn't lift a finger to help anyone. And let's not forget the trauma she survived. War, hunger, death, and the collapse of her world. That moment when she stands in the field and swears, "As God is my witness, I'm going to live through this, and when it's all over, I'll never be hungry again. No, nor any of my folk. If I have to lie, steal, cheat, or kill." That's not just drama. That's grit. Scarlett's selfish, but also the only one getting things done. By the end, she's over Ashley, over the old dream. She returns to Tara, not to relive the past, but to rebuild a future. You can't eat honor. Period. The film producers knew the KKK was a bad look, so instead of naming it directly, they danced around it. We get the infamous scene. Scarlett is attacked by a white man and a black man, and is saved by Big Sam, formerly enslaved, still loyal to her. Frank and Ashley head out that night to avenge her honor. Yeah, that scene. In the novel, it's 100% a Klan raid. In the film, they cut around it, but the vibe is undeniable. Rhett even lies to the police to cover for them, claiming they were at a brothel. Ashley survives. Frank dies. Justice? Who cares? Scarlett's honor is avenged. The view on slavery, or the lack thereof. This is where the movie goes full propaganda mode. Slavery isn't depicted as a brutal system. It's just the way things were. Enslaved people are shown as loyal, happy, and weirdly, grateful. Mammy is the classic sassy but loyal caretaker, and Prissy, a painful stereotype, shrill, incompetent, and played for laughs. Big Sam and others even cheer for the cause and help build Confederate defenses. Margaret Mitchell writes slavery like it was a feel-good lifestyle. They're shown as joyful, submissive, and loyal to their white masters. Like slavery wasn't that bad. That's not just inaccurate. That's lost cause myth in full HD. Slavery becomes a background aesthetic, not the violent institution. No beatings, no trauma, no rebellion, no fear. Just silent, smiling support for their oppressors. But here's what actually happened. Enslaved Black people did not voluntarily fight for the Confederacy. The Confederate government banned Black soldiers from enlisting until March 1865, literally weeks before the war ended, when they were desperate. By then, the South was losing badly. They were desperate. So they finally said, "Okay, fine. Maybe we'll arm Black men if they promise to stay enslaved after." Yes, that was real. The movie's take on slavery? Let's just say, if you learned history from Gone with the Wind, you'd think plantations were a lovely 5-star retreat. Some folks defend this portrayal by saying, well, when slavery ended, some people didn't know what to do next. Okay, but why? Because they had been systematically denied education, money, property, or rights for generations. Freedom wasn't a magic reset button. It was walking into a hostile, racist system with zero support. That fear was then weaponized to push the myth that slavery had been beneficial. It wasn't fear of freedom. It was fear of being freed into nothing. In the movie, Yankees are the villains. They're shown as vulgar, destructive, and completely lacking class. They're not liberators. They're wreckers. They show up just to ruin the Southern fairy tale. It fits perfectly into the lost cause narrative. The South was noble. The North was cruel. We weren't defeated. We were wronged. The film won 8 Academy Awards and became a cinematic legend. And let's be real, the production? Gorgeous. Clark Gable as Rhett Butler, absolutely iconic. Producer David O. Selznick knew Gable was the dream pick. No offense to anyone else, but Clark Gable is Rhett Butler. Period. End of casting. But now let's stir the tea. There's been long-standing speculation that Clark Gable may have been black passing, with possible Black and Native American ancestry on his father's side. Some biographers and genealogists have pointed out that Gable's father had a notably dark complexion, and that Gable himself had features and skin tone that sparked these rumors. Is it 100% confirmed? No. The records are murky, the whispers loud. But in a Hollywood where whiteness was currency and passing wasn't just a survival tool, it was an open secret. It's not impossible. And why the rumors started. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, 1939, Clark Gable was reportedly furious when he saw that the bathrooms on set were segregated for Black actors and crew members. He told the production he wouldn't film unless the signs were taken down. And they were. And the irony? If the heartthrob of the Confederacy fantasy was secretly not the white ideal everyone thought, that's the kind of twist that deserves its own movie. Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara. She was a British actress, barely known in the US. Selznick even called her the Scarlet Dark Horse. But when she showed up, boom, Oscar for Best Actress. Fun fact, Leigh was half French, half Irish, just like Scarlett's parents in the story. The visuals? Stunning. That famous sunset backdrop? Not real, but also not fake either. They didn't have Photoshop, but they had matte paintings, painted backdrops, and some of the most gorgeous Technicolor cinematography of the time. That iconic "As God Is My Witness" scene, Scarlett silhouetted against that blazing red-orange sky, that was shot using a painted backdrop with strategic lighting and color grading to make it look like a jaw-dropping Georgia sunset. No CGI, just artistry and technique. I mean, say what you want about the story, and believe me, I've got thoughts. But the sunset shots, the Technicolor fields, that's some pre-Photoshop magic I can't hate on. Cinematic manipulation never looked so devastatingly pretty. Racism behind the scenes. Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy, became the first Black actor to win an Oscar. Huge moment. But she wasn't allowed to sit at the table with the cast. She had to sit at a segregated table in the back. And Clark Gable? He actually threatened to boycott the premiere in protest of the venue's segregation policy until McDaniel herself asked him not to. So yes, Gone with the Wind made history. But so did the racism wrapped around it. Even after her Oscar, McDaniel was typecast in servant roles for the rest of her career, because that's all the industry would give her. And to make it worse, she was criticized by leaders of her own community, including Walter White, the head of the NAACP at the time. They weren't wrong for wanting better representation, but let's be real. It was 1940, and Black voices were still just a whisper. It wasn't like Hattie could just waltz into MGM and say, "Don't give me any more of those stupid servant roles." She didn't have that kind of power. Girls needed to eat, and Hattie knew it. That's why she clapped back with one of the coldest, most iconic lines ever. "Hell, I'd rather play a maid than be one." Translation: I'm working. I'm succeeding in a racist system. I'm getting paid. And until the roles change, I'll take what I can get over scrubbing someone else's floors. Did she deserve better roles? Absolutely. Should she have had to make that choice at all? Hell no. But she did what she had to do, and she made history doing it. Why it took so long to face the criticism. Back then, majority of the media at the time was white-owned and white-led. Early critiques were mostly ignored, buried, and dismissed. It wasn't until decades later that people started calling out the film's whitewashed framing of slavery, the South, and American history itself. In the final scene, Rhett's had enough. Scarlett's obsession with Ashley, her inability to move on from the past, he's done. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Boom. One of the most iconic lines in cinema. But here's the real question. Is Scarlett the future? Scarlett starts as a product of the Old South. She survives the collapse of everything she knew. She clings to Ashley, the fantasy. But eventually, she lets go. She returns to Tara, not to dream, but to rebuild. Maybe the real ending isn't Scarlett getting Rhett back. It's her finally choosing herself, and finally letting the Old South die. I'll go home, and I'll think of some way to get him back. After all, tomorrow is another day. Yes, the novel and movie both twist historical reality. But let's not forget, they came from a white woman raised on a Georgia plantation. This was her worldview, shaped by nostalgia, not justice. You can admire the cinematic brilliance, the performances, the costumes, and still call out the lies. We can watch it for what it is, or we can watch it and say, this is what they wanted us to believe, and here's what really happened. Because here's the danger. We still live in a world where people only see what they want to see, only hear what confirms what they already believe, where middle ground is vanishing, and truth gets rewritten if it's uncomfortable. That's why Gone with the Wind still matters, not as a love story, but as a case study in historical spin. So is Gone with the Wind just a pretty period piece, or a masterpiece of historical spin? Is Scarlett a tragic romantic, or a survivor in a world built on lies? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more Real Talk, where we pull the curtain back on Hollywood's history